There, it's football time. We're going to be chatting Pogba, Liverpool, Arsenal, and a little bit on Newcastle as well. John Bruin, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, how are you?
Very well, thanks. Let's start with Declan Rice there then. It's been a performance now on back-to-back occasions really ever since, curiously, the international break where Declan Rice has exploded back onto the scene, and particularly exploded onto the scene, I'd imagine, in England, to the point where, as you could hear there, we're very seriously considering the prospect of Gareth Southgate calling him up to an England squad quite soon if he leans that way.
Yeah, it's almost as if he's playing with the relief of not being in the island setup, isn't it? Sorry about that.
That's unfortunately we're laughing because we know it's kind of true.
It's very true.
Yes. I mean, I saw a bit of Declan Rice about a year ago for West Ham. Quite a bit. He kept dropping. Slaven Bilic kept dropping him into the West Ham team, and he looked pretty callow back then. He looked pretty short of maybe the physical attributes, but as Stephen Kelly was saying there, those are really coming to the fore now. And I actually agreed with what Stephen said there. When the player that he would replace for England would be Eric Dyer. Now, I think most England fans would say that Eric Dyer has been a reasonable servant to England, but he's not of the top level. Whereas Rice, at 19 years old, looks like he may have the ability to push on a little further than Eric Dyer. Listen, if you play in a midfield battle and you outshine Jorginho, N'Golo Kante, and I think it was Kovacevic, wasn't it, that played for Chelsea yesterday, then that's a good sign. That's a good sign. And, you know, yesterday he absolutely ran his heart out. He played on with cramp, actually, didn't he? Yeah. Declan Rice, hugely talented player. The only thing is that at just 19, you wouldn't expect him to be promoted into the England team at the moment because there's a few midfielders around. But you can see why Gareth Southgate made that call, certainly.
Yeah, it's very grim, isn't it, listening to that? We're just, because we're so shorn of talent in the team that particularly a young player coming through like this who can play defence or particularly central, I suppose, the holding position, the number 6, and the clamour for, you know, I think the fact that he was brought up on Match of the Day last night and given, I suppose, great prominence is worrying from an Irish perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see your concern. I mean, I know three or so years ago you had the same issue with Jack Grealish. I mean, you know, funny enough, Jack Grealish hasn't actually played for England since then, but he will do. You know, I mean, he's like Declan Rice. He's a player that's grown, you know, as a physical specimen, and you can see what a talent he is. Yeah, it must be very frustrating. I mean, you know, from an outsider looking in, I would question the how much work has been done to make him feel comfortable within playing for the Irish setup. You'd also say that I'd say that Gareth Southgate as a sort of horse whisperer might be a bit more convincing than Martin O'Neill, and let's face it, he also has a lot more to bargain with, which is the chance to play in European Championships and World Cup, which is what footballers essentially want to do when they play international football. I also understand that this issue of being Irish, I unfortunately, you know, can only play for England, so, you know, you don't have a choice. But this dual nationality thing is it's becoming such a common topic in international football now. Declan Rice is, I suppose, the most high-profile player that's in that picture at the moment. But, you know, listening to him, he's very English. And you've got to say...
John, you're absolutely killing us here. Like, not only are you a far better football team, but now he's very English.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know... you don't often hear him speak.
8:30 in the morning, John. This is a Monday morning. This is what we have for the week. Like, no hope.
Our week has got off into the back. Like, I think the worst thing about it is not what he sounds like, John, but the fact that he sounds so bloody intelligent. When he was interviewed on Sky Sports yesterday, He was like, he so well broke down exactly what he had to do defensively yesterday. He's like, oh, well, they can bring Hazard into this gap, and if you move there, then Kante pops in, and then Kovacic pops in there, and it was like, he broke down very succinctly what he had to do against Chelsea yesterday. So not only are Ireland losing a top-class player, they're also losing potentially a future manager, the way he thinks at 19 years of age.
Oh my God, you're even thinking of that?
Oh, well, I think you might be projecting a little bit too far with that. But yeah, Yes, I mean some players. Some players, look born leaders from quite a young age, don't they? I mean, Tom Davis actually captained Everton yesterday at Swansea. So, yes. So if not a future manager, a future captain. Sorry, it's still not looking any better, is it?
No. I think the fact that Owen is trying to kind of imply that the fact that he's intelligent makes it more likely he'll choose England over Ireland. You're possibly hitting the nail on the head there. If you honestly were Rice, what decision would you make?
If you're more savvy, you would probably choose England over Ireland.
More savvy?
Whether or not that actually, he could be a very intelligent person, but his patriotism, which, let's not...
Patriotism is crap. Forget about patriotism.
But it could be a factor.
Yeah, I mean... Yeah.
It's also the money involved as well. I mean,
exactly.
Look at those players. I mean, someone like Harry Maguire went to the World Cup. A year ago, we knew Harry Maguire was a decent enough player, but he goes to the World Cup. There is interest in him from Manchester United for a price of 70 million. Even though he doesn't go to Manchester United, he gets a new contract. He's probably pulling in £100,000 a week. Now, if Declan Rice is savvy, and evidence suggests that, then you're essentially securing your own future and that of your family for a couple of generations at this point. If you become an England player, it's sad that you would have such a cynical thought, but that would be where...
It's funny you say that, John, securing the future of his family, because it's clearly that family and lineage that has been playing for Ireland. You're playing for Ireland. You're playing for Ireland. Oh, hang on, get a few bob. Well, I'm so this time. You're not playing. My son's not playing for Ireland, but our future is secure.
Yes. Yeah,
this is grim, Owen.
Yeah, no, it certainly is grim. There's going to be plenty more about Declan Rice over the next couple of weeks. It's just whether or not that he's given that olive branch by Southgate now, and it's like, if you choose England right now, you're going to be in the Nations League squad straight away for the October internationals, which would be kind of at least we'd be we'll be pulling the plaster off now. It'll be done and dusted, and it doesn't spill over into the new year, because obviously if it doesn't get sorted out next month, it's going to be a 2019.
It's kind of like something he would do, though, Southgate, as well, because he's young and he's improving, and why not bring him in and educate him along?
I'm sure he can nurture him in to be the future England manager.
Yeah, you're really mad at him being a manager.
Well, I just think from that one post-match interview yesterday, I've really made my mind up. That
I'd love Rice's next press conference, he's badgered on the Ireland manager job down the line, as if he hasn't enough to be doing because of Owen.
John, let's talk about Manchester United. A 1-1 draw with Wolves at the weekend. Of course, Alex Ferguson was back at Old Trafford. Great to see him there. The current Manchester United manager, though, Jose Mourinho, speaking after the game, quotes that are probably one of the more interesting topics from the weekend again. So he said basically that Wolves play like I like to play, which is like the World Cup final. That's the attitude I like my teams to have every match. It is a basic law of football. You have to play at the maximum of your potential. Unless you are playing in such a weak league against such weak opponents, where playing at 30% of your potential is enough. We all know that is not the case. I can't explain the difference of attitude, because I never had a difference of attitude. For me, it is difficult to explain that. He says his players are at 30%. He doesn't know why that is. It seems that this is happening an awful lot, John, that Manchester United players don't have the correct attitude, and Jose Mourinho can't put his finger on why that is.
Yeah, those players seem to spend a lot of time under a bus, don't they? Yeah, I mean, there's a culture struggle at Manchester United. I mean, I'm sure this is on your list, Darren, but what Paul Pogba, the quotes that came over last night, the 10:30 embargo quotes, are pretty much him saying, it's not my fault. We're at Manchester United, I suppose, we're in this situation where very few people are actually accepting blame for the fact that this looks likely to be another disappointing season. I mean, last season they finished second. Let's introduce that caveat, but they were still way off Manchester City. I would have concerns. I mean, listen, I was looking at this the other day. Jose Mourinho's fall at Chelsea. Now, if you recall, the incident with the female physio happened on the first weekend of the season. He didn't actually get sacked until December the 16th, I believe. So there was a hell of a slide during that. But there were a few lulls, and they won 3 games in succession. There's a few calls about how Manchester United are turning things around. If you actually watched Jose Mourinho's press conference on Friday, he was pretty much hailing himself and hailing a turnaround in fortunes. This has got a few rounds to go yet. I think the thing actually to watch out next for, which happened at Chelsea, he started getting sent to the stands for arguing with referees. He's not done that yet. Now, that may lead me to question whether he has maybe lost a little bit of passion on the sidelines there, or maybe it might just be the fact that the Old Trafford dugout is actually withdrawn from the pitch, so he's just not quite close enough to have a go at the fourth official.
Yeah.
But that start hasn't happened. But that's something that I predict will happen soon. The referees will start to shoulder the blame as well.
Yeah, like it's interesting as well if you want to kind of cling on to any bit of information we get from the dressing room as to whether or not he's losing the dressing room. You mentioned the Paul Pogba quotes that came over late last night. He said that when we are at home, we should attack. That's Old Trafford. We are here to attack. I think teams are scared when they see Man United attacking. That was our mistake today. We've had 3 games at home and we've only got 4 points. It's not enough. Now, we'll all remember Paul Pogba at the start of the season said he'll get fined or something else might happen if he speaks his mind about his current situation. This suggests to me that Paul Pogba isn't so afraid to speak his mind so much anymore, which suggests to me that Paul Pogba and his level of respect for perhaps the discipline that might be exacted on him from Jose Mourinho afterwards has waned a little bit. Yeah,
that would be my reading of it. Or maybe he thinks that in a him or me situation, that it would be Pogba that the club's board would favour, and that, if you adhere to the rumours that were around over the summer towards the end of the transfer window, it was that Mourinho was prepared to let Pogba go, whereas the board, Ed Woodward in particular, were not prepared to let Pogba go. I think with someone like Paul Pogba, if you allow him to have his own way, if you give him enough rope, he will take it. And I suppose an issue there is if the players aren't afraid of Mourinho, well then we've got even further problems at Manchester United. If Mourinho starts losing respect from his players, which is essentially the central tenet of how he manages teams, because he's not a great tactician. He's rigorous in his defensive organisation, but mostly he's a man motivator. He gets players on his side. The best teams he's coached, which would be obviously Porto, his first great team, Chelsea, first time around, and Inter Milan. What pushed them over the line to win honours, as they did so often, was the motivation of Mourinho, essentially the personality cult of Mourinho. The players aren't buying into that personality cult. But what have you got from
That's
Jose
really
Mourinho?
interesting, because to put him down, as more of a man manager than a tactician. And also there's the argument that, the game is slightly passing him by now, that he hasn't really evolved.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I wouldn't say that you would call him a tactical knave years ago. I mean, Chelsea were very well organised, but when he hasn't developed his own organisational, his own tactics, I mean, until Rui Faria moved on in the summer, he hadn't really moved around his backroom staff. The fresh ideas that maybe Sir Alex Ferguson, would change his backroom staff around quite a lot. And, you do wonder, say you compare him to Pep Guardiola, as we always have to, you wonder how much homework goes in for Mourinho compared to Pep Guardiola. I know that, okay, it was a PR thing, but the image you got from the Manchester City film was that Pep Guardiola, on these long flights to wherever Manchester City are playing, sat there working through plans for the opposition. Are we sure that Jose Mourinho is doing that? Because certainly in that Wolves game, it didn't seem as though they were prepared to play against, Ruben Neves and João Moutinho, 2 players who Jose Mourinho should know very well. I mean, they even share the same agent, for God's sake. And they didn't really seem to have a plan for them.
Yeah.
The midfield he started in the game, I know Matic wasn't playing, but you're just like, they're playing a team that passes the ball a lot here, Fellaini was playing.
Yeah, it's a strange one. Like, it's very true what you say, John, about how it took a lot of time before this whole thing sort of fell to pieces at Chelsea in that infamous season. At this point, I didn't quite realise it was December. It felt like it happened a lot quicker than that. So people who've got money on Jose Mourinho getting sacked by Christmas, there's still hope for you at this point, I think. We do want to move on to Liverpool. The title race is on, I think it's fair to say at this point. The thing that I think is quite interesting, if you want to compare Liverpool to Manchester City, is, say, who would win in a game between their 2 benches, or who is the better player, say, between Xherdan Shaqiri and Riyad Mahrez, who, of course, both were impressive enough at the weekend. Shaqiri, strangely, taken off at half-time. Mo Salah, they're saying, has ended his drought. It was only 3 games. It wasn't that much of a drought. But is it fair to say, from your perspective here at this point, John, that when you look at the likes of Shaqiri, that they do have depth at this point to go to full 38 games and finally get their hands on that Premier League title?
Yeah. I mean, go back to the Champions League final in May. The forward that they could bring on was Dominic Solanke, and now they've been able to add players. I mean, Daniel Sturridge being fit again has obviously changed things a little bit. Daniel Sturridge seems to have bought into Klopp's Liverpool, perhaps for the first time. It's been 3 years. And Shaqiri, he played 45 minutes, was probably the best player on the pitch, subbed at half-time. That's a novel way of looking at it. But I was hearing Peter Odemwingie speak yesterday about playing with Shaqiri, and Charlie Adam expressed similar sentiments, though perhaps in not such a complimentary way. I don't think he's a 90-minute player. Do you, Shaqiri?
No, yeah, it's a good point.
45 though. You know, I mean, it was just very strange because he played so well, and it was suggested that Klopp wanted to kind of just copper fasten the 2-goal advantage. I don't believe that. Liverpool,
that's what he said.
Yeah, Liverpool don't play like that though. Do you know what I mean? You're not 2-0 up at home to Stoke, and you're like,
maybe they play like that this season. Maybe
they do, but there was no suggestion Liverpool were ever going to not win that game. I mean, the game. So Shaqiri, in terms of, it's almost like it was. I'm going to test you out here in terms of your commitment or your mentality, because you don't get taken off at half time playing that well. It was utterly unusual. I'm just wondering what the real reason was behind it.
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe Klopp sees Shaqiri as some sort of pinch hitter, like in baseball, where you bring him on, he does the job. It's fair to say that Shaqiri won't be the guy leading the press from the front, in the style of Firmino or even Rush going back to the 1980s or whatever. He's not that type of player. The player that Bayern Munich, I suppose that's how they employed him. At Stoke, he was inconsistent. He could be brilliant, or he could not play a part in a struggling team. He wasn't much use to them, it has to be said, apart from the odd flash. So, if Jurgen Klopp's strategy is to dig in for victory these days and hang on, because that pretty much is the way that Jurgen Klopp's teams have always played, which is almost to blitz the opposition away and then hang on grimly. That was the way. Shaqiri's not the man for hanging on grimly, I would say.
But John makes a good point, though. They have, Shaqiri's very different to their other options, and Sturridge is very different to the other options. And then you talk about Fabinho, Keita, all these players who've kind of had almost bit-part roles so far. They probably have different kind of parts of the jigsaw that they can put in to suit, the opposition. And I think Liverpool they're not going to be as one-dimensional now.
No, definitely. I think already we've seen it this season that they're very, very much not one-dimensional. The whole heavy metal football thing is being completely discarded. You're right, though. I don't think taking off Xherdan Shaqiri after 45 minutes is indicative of a team that are more solid. It's just a borderline bizarre move, and I think there is more to that than meets the eye. I'd agree with you on that.
Nobody cares because, you know what I mean? Nobody cares Liverpool because they've won all their games.
Yeah, we do want to move on to Arsenal and Newcastle very quickly before we wrap up. Just on Arsenal, quick words on this, John. The whole result yesterday has been kind of glorified. Lacazette and Aubameyang's performance, brilliance. There is a sense, though, that they're papering over the cracks a little bit here with in terms of defence, but also off the pitch. A lot of articles written yesterday about the Ivan Gazidis departure. Sam Wallace making the excellent point that they wouldn't lose a player at AC Milan, so why the hell have they lost a chief executive?
Well, actually, I mean, the one thing is that we do know that players move on for more money, and it would appear that Ivan Gazidis has doubled his wage. Now, that's in the real world of employment rather than the fantasy world of football. That's what people do. I mean, my information going back a couple of years was that Gazidis probably would fancy a move back to America. I mean, he's actually brought up in Manchester, went to school up there, but has been in America quite a long time before he came to Arsenal. But I don't know, AC Milan, it's a bright new project. What that says about Arsenal, I think when Arsene Wenger moved on, the rumour appeared to be that Josh Kroenke, son of Stan, was becoming a prime mover in the club. And it was him that helped put in those building blocks almost around Arsene Wenger. So maybe Ivan Gazidis' control over the club maybe wasn't what it was, and AC Milan, he will be given a much broader remit than he's lately been allowed at Arsenal. But it has to be said that the money looked good, and living in Milan maybe better than North London. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's weird, but people who say that he was ready for a new challenge in his life. I mean, there was a bloody good new challenge there on the table from Arsenal, and maybe there is the argument to be made that he had a duty to serve out another season or two at Arsenal, since he was the man who essentially oversaw that whole shift. But just a final point before I let you go, John. It is on Newcastle. Kevin Keegan, his extracts that were carried in the Times on Saturday were pretty great. He details Mike Ashley's empire of self-harm, is how he put it, and just one little element we want to pick out here is the head of recruitment, Tony Jimenez, who had positioned himself as a football expert, but it turned out this bewildering character, the man in charge of Newcastle's recruitment no less, admitted during discussions about potential transfer targets that he had never even heard of Per Mertesacker. Can you believe that? Mertesacker had made his debut for Germany 4 years earlier. He was recognised as one of the outstanding players in the 2006 World Cup and had been an ever-present for his national team when they reached the final of Euro 2008. He was one of the best defenders in Europe and would go on to win over 100 caps for his country. Yet Jimenez didn't have the foggiest who he was. I tried my hardest to retain a sense of humour, and somehow I could laugh on occasion at the absurdity of it all. He also goes on to talk about how Jimenez railroaded an effort to sign Luka Modric before he went on to sign for Tottenham Hotspur. It all paints this picture that Newcastle have done remarkably well to remain a Premier League club and not actually get relegated to the Championship and plummet further and further and further. Their bounce back ability is nothing short of a miracle, really, John.
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing is with Newcastle, whenever they've dropped in the Championship, and they've done that twice under Mike Ashley, they automatically become the biggest club in that division. And both times, I mean, to be slightly even-handed to Mike Ashley, which I wouldn't be that comfortable with, he did finance them coming up in 2009-10, I think it was, and last 2 seasons ago under Rafa Benitez, they were definitely the best funded team in the Championship. The thing is, though, as Kevin Keegan says, both those relegations were the result of self-harm, of mismanagement behind the scenes. The Dennis Wise chapters, I mean, the Times was a serialisation this morning talking about a couple of transfers that were forced on him to do favours for agents, which is the reason that Kevin Keegan said he walked away. And a couple of fairly notorious players that Newcastle signed, one of them being Zisco. The Mike Ashley picture, you know, this is a guy that didn't really know that much about football, came in, essentially got his mates in. And as Kevin Keegan says, you know, Dennis Wise is a guy that knows the game, was a very good footballer, 20 years of professional, and was pulling tricks like this. None of this is illegal, as Kevin Keegan says. None of it's illegal. But the thing is, it's not in the spirit of the game, and this isn't the spirit of Newcastle, the club that he loved. And I know that Kevin Keegan has only been back to the club once since all that happened. That's nearly 10 years ago, which is a shame, because when we think about Newcastle, we think about Newcastle's revival in the 90s, there's only one man that stands out, isn't there? And that's Kevin Keegan. And if you remember that Mike Ashley, when he first came in that sort of populist manoeuvre, which was to bring back Kevin Keegan to the club. Remember how excited the city of Newcastle was? It was like they were living 1996 all over again. Well, unfortunately, it didn't last very long. And this is a very revealing story, told very well by Daniel Taylor. And yeah, I recommend anyone pick up those extracts because it's really very interesting. Yeah, definitely. And it was an all draw for them at the weekend. We might get into a little bit of Rafa Benitez some other time on the show. John, thank you very much for your time. Good stuff. Yeah, good to talk to you, lads. Cheers. John Bruin there on the line with us this Monday morning.